Hey everyone, Mike Jasper here. I'm a parenting coach to the rich and famous all over the world. My goal is to make parenting easier and fun for everyone by interviewing the best of the best in every field and learn how they were parented. So I'm excited to be interviewing Lee Woolard. The reason I'm so excited to be talking with him is because not only is he really successful in business, he is successful as a parent as well. And as an entrepreneur, when he was running his fast growing digital marketing firm, after many years, he was feeling burned out and his health was declining. He had the inner strength to reinvent himself and become one of England's top business coaches. Lee is the perfect guest for this show because I want to see what we can learn from him about how he was parented. Maybe we can learn something to help us raise our kids to be entrepreneurs or have that inner strength and drive like Lee. Welcome, Lee.
Pleasure. Look forward to it.
Hey, Lee. I'm just wondering, first of all, how was your relationship with your parents when you were growing up?
My parents were 17 when they had me,
Mm.
and so I kind of grew up around adults pretty quickly because none of my parents' friends had kids. So although my dad was a father figure, we were quite close in age, so I always looked up to him. And when the recession hit I'd be guessing in the 90s, he ended up setting up a business on his own. So I was able to watch him go to work on his business, and I was inspired by that side of him as an entrepreneur. But I also saw the other side of it, which was where him and my mother would clash because he was working all the time. And
Mm.
as much as I would have this, well, I think it's fantastic, I would love to do that, I also had this other side, which was, well, actually, I'd like to spend more time with him. And I'm not saying I had no time with him, but I wouldn't also say the time I had with him was deep quality time.
Mm.
So by the time I turned 18, 19 and decided to leave Australia and come to England and find myself, I kind of had missed the opportunity to really spend some good quality time with him. And then a few years later, I became a father, and I was determined to spend, and we do this, I guess, as human beings, was what I was maybe lacking as a child, I wanted to give to my son. But I also wanted to run a business as well. So I started to ask people who were successful in business, what, if you gave some advice to somebody, what would you say? And 9 out of 10 of them were saying, spend as much time with your family, because I never did.
Mm.
So, like, if all of these people are saying this and I missed out on it as a child, I was obviously listening for that too, then I wanted to make sure I put that in place. And at times it was really challenging.
Do you think that having less time with your father and more time for yourself led you to being more independent?
Definitely made me more independent, made me more determined.
Mm.
So one of the parents that I spoke to at that when I'd just become a father, he recommended a book to me called Bringing Up Boys. And it's only a
Mm.
thin book, but that's what it looks
Right.
like. And in there, it talks about, and one of the bits that stuck out to me was, if you think of dads, a lot of dads will, if they've got a daughter, if the daughter falls over and hurts herself, will give her a cuddle and say, oh, it's okay. And girls get to learn how to express their emotions. Whereas for boys, it's like, toughen up, son, get on with it. So they don't know how to express their emotions. And a lot of the times, I don't ever recall my dad saying toughen up, but I don't ever recall him being empathetic maybe in a way that I required. And again, that's my perception of it. So I did hold a lot of stuff in. So I wanted to make sure that, okay, based on what this person's saying, I want to make sure that my son knows how to express his emotions. So I gave him the best opportunity to do that, certainly from a very early age. So whenever he was dealing with something, he knew that he could express it. So that was one of the things that stuck out to me, which then, I guess, most people that meet my eldest son will go, he's so mature, he's so balanced, he's so calm. He too is in business for himself, so he's obviously watched me and he's inspired by that. And I know he is from the conversations we have, but I would say I have a closer bond with him than I did with my dad.
Interesting. I was raised the same way. My father, we hardly talk that much about anything other than business or anything really critical. Definitely nothing about feelings. So, raising my son, I made sure that he knew that anything was on the table. He could talk about his feelings, about how he felt about things, and he can express anger. And it was okay because I knew how to react with him on that. So I think that's super important. And how about your mom? What was the role she was playing in this time and while you were growing up?
She was more the at-home mum, stay-at-home mum, caring, loving, always made sure we had clean clothes and food on the table. And although
Right.
she didn't mollycoddle, she certainly was a very stable um, person to have around.
That's super interesting because what I'm noticing is the more successful people that I'm interviewing, the more I'm noticing a pattern of one parent might be really hard driving in their career and really successful, and maybe not so accessible or around so much for parenting. And then one of the parents is very loving, and unconditional love is part of the equation.
Now we pair, both my wife and I had similar scenarios in our family. So we both wanted to make sure that our boys don't experience that, but we're also got a level of awareness where we go, don't overparent them, don't over, otherwise when they step out into the world, they're not going to be able to survive.
That's a really good point. I noticed that for my son, as we were over parenting and he was growing up, we would do too much for him to help. And then what I learned was as he became an adult and he was trying to solve adult problems, but he hasn't solved kid problems yet and failed at the kid level. So it was a little bit more difficult. So I totally agree with what you're saying there, not to overparent.
And I think
And
what tends to happen is if you don't stop, as soon as you've got some disharmony or some feelings towards your parents, what we tend to do is once we discover it as teenagers is we actually hold on to it into our adult life and copy the same patterns subconsciously without even thinking about it. Whereas actually, if you get to that point where you go, right, I don't want that to keep happening and I don't want to pass that on to my children. So how do I learn to understand that? And when you understand it, then you can go, okay, well, now I've got a level of awareness around me. I'm going to take little steps to put what I believe in is a bit more of, okay, where do they need a little bit of guidance? And where do they need a little bit of, what, go and make a mistake, but know that when you fall, you can come back here and go, whoa, I made a mistake there. And it's embracing that and knowing that really sometimes some of the mistakes are never really that bad. They're the ones that
right.
you've got to really anchor in and make them feel comfortable that they can come back to you because they get over them quicker, they learn faster, and then they can develop faster. And that's what we're seeing with our kids
Right.
is they're not running around with that stress or tension. Whereas I know for me and a lot of my friends that grew up in the same era as me, that's what a lot of them just have running through them all the time and they don't see another way.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. My experience is that most parents are making it up as they go and they're trying things that work and it seems to be working. And until it's not, sometimes we wake up and something terrible is happening. And that's when we go after the tools to learn something to change the pattern in our family and our raising of our kids. when it's really failing. And so that's how it was for me. I thought everything was not great, but it wasn't that bad. I didn't realize that it was much worse than I thought. And I ended up waking up one day and getting a jolt in the middle of the night, phone ringing, saying it was from the hospital. And my son had turned himself in for having suicidal thoughts. And that was when I made the decision it was time to fix this and learn something new. And that is kind of the norm. And I'm hoping through some of the work that we're doing here and sharing these problems that parents won't have to go that far off the wrong track in order to start looking for some new tools. And yeah, so I totally agree with you.
Probably at some points, if I look back on it now, was trying to be too perfect and not wanting to make any mistakes and almost wanting him to, especially the first one, to be my best friend. And then when he got to a teenage year, there was a period where he needed some more boundaries to feel safe. And I was probably giving him a little bit too long a leash. But again, looking back at when he made some mistakes, what was great was he was able to come back to me and work his way through it and go, actually, that's not how I want to behave, or that's not what I want to do. And again, we reflect on some of those sometimes and think, do you know what? That was where he learned the most, was when he actually made some of those mistakes and learned to grow and became an adult quite quickly. So when people outside of us meet him and speak to him, they go, oh my God, he's so level-headed, he's so mature. He still has challenges. He's not just cruising through life like a swan and everything's rosy. He has different challenges. But what's
Right.
happening is emotionally, he's able to, in more cases than not, either process it within 24 hours or at the maximum, if it's a bigger issue, that it might take him no longer than a week. But I know for me, I held on to some things for 30 years.
Yeah, I totally see your point there. And I've experienced it myself. Now that I have these tools where they're coaching tools and mindset tools that took me years to get to the point to learn them. And now my son is putting these into his life and he's acting on them. He's making progress much faster than I did. And it's super exciting to watch it happen and just see how fast progress can happen.
Such a gift to give to your children as well, because if you get to them early enough, which is, if you're in your 30s now or your 40s, you've got more time where you've been holding on. So you've got to learn to let go more. Whereas if
Yeah.
they're in their teens to late teens to early 20s to even 30, there's less unpacking to do. They haven't held on to it for as long. And then they've got a longer period of enjoying themselves going forward. So again, I always kept in my mind was no matter how long it takes, I always said it's our responsibility as a parent to keep working at these things, to go on the journey with our children, and also keep checking in and reviewing, okay, are we doing this the best we can? What advice can we get from other people who've been through situations that can help? And I was never very good at asking for help in the past, whereas now I have no issues.
I totally agree. I learned how fast I could make progress in a business by hiring a coach when I was very young. I learned from Tony Robbins that we can turn decades into days. Whatever we want to learn, someone has spent maybe a decade working on it and has probably made a book and maybe even a workshop about it. And so when I started my first company, I was 21 years old. And I knew that I didn't know much about marketing and sales. I had a really good skill as being a machinist. Um, but in order to get work and really get a company going, I hired a coach right away. And within a few years, I was a market leader in Silicon Valley. So for some reason, though, as a parent, I thought I knew what I was doing. I was a successful businessman. My son's mom was a successful lawyer and top of her class. It just seemed like we could figure it out. And we did figure it out by the time my son was 18 years old. So we had 18 years of trial and error. And I think everyone can figure it out. But instead of going through all the trial and error and the doctors and the tutors and just the wrong paths over and over again, I'm hoping to inspire parents to study some life coaching skills and growth mindset skills to become a masterful parent.
I definitely touch the hot plate way too many times.
What are one or two nuggets that you'd like to pass on to parents?
The first thing I always do is stop for a moment and take responsibility yourself. So instead of looking at what that teen is doing and saying, oh, it's their fault, just stop and say, okay, in this moment, how can I support them? So quite often, if you react to what they're doing, you really are putting your shit on them. So it's stopping you from doing that. It's going, okay, well, why are they expressing that behavior? And how do you, instead of going in and reacting, asking them a question, you know, what made you do that? And what were you feeling when you did it? Those two questions are great because they have to give you an answer. And you have to stop, even if there's silence, just what made you do that? And what were you feeling when you did it? And it might be, I was feeling angry with the world, or I'm so stressed, or okay, well, then now you can look at, okay, well, how can we support you? But even then, you can say, well, what do you think we could do? And what you're actually doing there is teaching them to think through a problem. You might have all the knowledge and experience because you're 10, 20 or 30 years or 40 years older. But the reality is, rather than giving them the answers or saying, you shouldn't do that and you should have done this, and they're just going to go back and do it again. Whereas actually go, they're still in my area. I'm still responsible for them. So actually, why don't I give them this skill so that when this repeats itself next year, the year after, whatever, you can go, okay, what made you do that? Or what do you think you could do? And they're learning to solve problems. I think we've become, as a society, too quick to bail them out. And I think it goes back to, if you keep doing it, let's use money as an example. If you keep giving your child money, you're in a way telling them, actually, I don't believe in you to be able to go out and look after yourself and do it for yourself. And I know that's difficult at times because you think, oh, I've got the money, or I've worked hard for it and I can do it. Yeah, I think sometimes you should. But I think the times that they're going to learn and grow the most is when you actually say no. And I can remember my father, the first time he said no to me, as in, not that I ever asked him for a lot, but there was a specific time where I was back against the wall and he's just like, I can't. And now he never said no because you need this to grow. He just said, I can't. But in my mind, when I look back, I go, that was the best thing he ever said to me. And I'm so glad because I figured it out. So now I keep that in the back pocket for my children at times. Go, well, no. Or so, yeah, definitely it's that pause and respond and support rather than react.
I like to think of parenting as personal growth for the parent. If our kids are struggling and we have the wrong tools, we can just make it worse. In business, it was super clear. If I wanted to get to the next level in sales, it wasn't about doing more of the same thing because there's only so many hours in a day. I had to learn new mindset and strategies to operate at the next level. The mindset that I had when I was making $100,000 per year is a lot different than the mindset that I had when my company had grown to $100 million a year. In parenting, I found it to be the same thing. My son was unmotivated and our relationship was terrible. At first, I thought I need to fix him. But after I changed my tools and my mindset around parenting, my son and I have a great relationship, and my son is living his dream life.
It's usually a reflection of you, the reasons why they're doing certain things, or your partner, or the environment they're in. So by doing some work on yourself, you actually go, oh, whoa, now I know why he's doing that or she's doing that. And then you've got
Yeah.
awareness. That's the first step. And then you can start to go, right, now that I understand that they might have a self-image issue, and actually that's coming from me, or that's coming from my partner. Right, how do we take steps now? And I always go, I'm going to work on this for 3 years. Everything I always say, that I'm going to work on it for 3 years, because it takes the pressure off of having to fix it by next week. It's
Mm.
small incremental steps over a long period of time, and you can see your whole family transform, and the harmony in the family change. And then all of a
Right.
sudden you're not trying to fix something quickly. It's not a fix. It's like you said, go on a journey with your child and yourself, where you go, do you know what? That was amazing to see us grow. You start creating a dynamic that everybody feels happy in, as opposed to, I've got one parent that is not aware and is pushing me. I've got another one that's very loving, or I've got these two parents that are clashing all the time. You're not going to clash when you're working on these things. Fix the problem with him, but actually realize the problem was with you. And that's so
It was.
common. And it was the same for me at points. And like you said before, I still review myself all the time. So maybe the other day in the car, something happened, and I reacted. It wasn't a bad reaction, but I was expecting a behavior. And actually my son went, Dad, that's not what I said. And I went, oh, and I had to, in the moment, apologize and review.
Yeah.
I've been doing it for a long time, but I don't beat myself up about it. Oh, I could have been better there. Or even before I'm going into a situation with them, I think, how can I be better there? So picking them up from school, and, oh, you've had a test today. How did you go? What did you love about it? What was challenging? Yeah. What did you
Yeah.
learn? And I always say, did you have fun? Did you have a laugh with your friends? Because
Mm.
again, the reality is, when I'm 70, 80, 90 years old, I want to look back and go, do you know what? My kids want to see me. I
Mm.
was a good
Yeah.
person to them, not a dictator or somebody that mollycoddled them too much, and they just come to me when they want something. There's got to be
Right.
that fair level of, treat them how you want to be treated.
There was a point where things were really bad, and I had a conversation with them to let them know that I wanted to change my parenting style. I told him that I'd been studying parenting as a life coach and wanted to try it with him. That meant that I would stop telling him what to do, and I would start asking him what he wants, and I would help him get it. We met once per week to review goals and strategies. I wasn't going to help with money. I just wanted to help with cultivating a big dream and help build a path to the dream. And it worked big time. When we first started, I asked him what he wanted to do for work, and he was thinking about fast food, and he hated the idea, and he was very worried about how was he going to survive in the world. And we just started talking about bigger and bigger goals. At one point, he had a pool cleaning business. He was really motivated by money, but within a year, he could barely get out of bed to do the job. Then we started exploring what he wanted to do next. And he was really passionate about cars. He said, just something in the car world, mechanic, whatever he could think of. And so we kept dreaming bigger and bigger about that as well. And I asked him, if you could do anything, what is it that you would want to do? And he said, well, I want to be a race car driver or a coach to coach people. And so we started exploring that, and he thought it was impossible. But however, he found a racetrack where they train young drivers to be coaches. You don't actually have to be super fast, but they train you to get faster and faster, and then you teach people how to drive faster and faster. So now he's a driving coach at one of the most prestigious coaching schools in the country. and he keeps getting promoted. They said that he's the best coach that they've ever had, and now they're recording him to train the next coaches. So he's making a bunch of money. He has his own house, he has a garage full of toys, motorcycles and bicycles and race cars, and he's just living his dream life. And it's not my dream life, it's not his mom's dream life, it's his dream life.
We also, if you think about, let's say the first, well, in our case, 23 years, the first 23 years of their life, we only get once. And the reality is after that, they are adults, and you can either spend the next 23 years repairing it or catch them while they're young enough to give them this gift.
Right.
And that gift is you working on yourself first to generate the awareness, and then you can apply that into your relationship with them. And the beauty about them when they're that young, even under 23, is they adapt really fast.
Yes.
Really, really fast. Whereas as adults, when we're in our 30s or our 40s or our 50s, it takes us longer because we've been playing the same story over and over for so long ago, and it's been passed down from previous generations. And it's our family dynamic or the environment we're in. And all of a sudden, you're putting yourself in a different, uncomfortable environment, but you've got to go, I need to do this, otherwise it isn't going to change, because they're likely then to go and pass it on to their kids. So sometimes I used it as a driver to go, I don't want this to be passed on anymore. I don't want to see my grandkids having those challenges. So what can I do now? Take the responsibility. And am I perfect at it? No. But I'm a hell of a lot better with the awareness now than when I didn't have it.
I agree. If we can break this pattern now, it doesn't just solve the problem for our kids, it solves the problem for their kids, especially if we are doing this on purpose and we are figuring out what was going wrong and what tools we needed, and our kid is learning the tools with us. That is going to be a huge difference for the whole lineage, because we can take these tools and pass them down. Huge. Another thing that was really big for me was learning that every time I answered a question for my son, I was actually robbing him of the chance to become a leader and be self-motivated. And it got to the point where I was answering so many of the little questions, even if he was to ask or if it came up, how I was answering too many of the little questions and not letting him solve any of his own problems. And he became less and less motivated and got to the point where he would ask me, or if I would ask him a question, he would say, I don't know, what do you think? And that is not going to be good out in the world. And that is not raising a leader, that is raising a follower. So I learned that what I needed to do is I needed to ask him questions and let him answer it. And in the very beginning, it was harder because he wasn't used to it. So he would ask me, I'm not sure, what do you think, Dad? And then I would always have to answer with a question. And that question would be like, well, I'm not quite sure. I need to think about it, but let's see if we can narrow it down to 2 or 3 options. And then he would narrow it down to 3. And then I'd say, okay, what if it's top 2, what would it be? Okay, the top 1, what would it be? So I helped him learn the thinking process to get to what he wanted to try next, and whatever he thought the answer would be. And that was the process, and it really helped over time. But it was a huge thing for me to realize that every time I answered a problem or a question for him, I was actually leading him closer to being a follower than being a leader.
And again, back on where you said he was stuck there, looking, if you step back from that, it's quite sad to see somebody having to experience that and you being part of it. And that was the same for me with my son, especially at certain points. So it was always like, okay, I want to stop that so that because we all want to grow. And when I moved from Australia at 19 to the UK, I was independent. Nobody told me what to do. So I wanted to make sure that I also gave him that freedom, but also let him know there's an arm around you. And before you're 27, go and try as many things as you can and go and experience things and make mistakes and know that actually the mistakes are going to get you there faster. Try things that don't, you maybe not even want, or try things that you want, that when you're doing it, you think, actually, this isn't what I want. Great, because now you know what you do and don't want. And just because somebody's having success at 22 near you, or you think they are, they might have done one thing and they might believe they're being successful, but actually that one thing might not be what fulfills them in 5 years. Whereas you go out and trying things means, hey, there's no pressure and you can become your person and then spend the rest of your life enjoying what you're doing and hopefully transferring those skills to your children, because we're talking about it as we do it.
Absolutely. I like to look at it now as parenting as a long game. It's not about even getting them to college or through college. It's about finding a dream that they want to work toward. And it's their dream with their natural gifts and helping them work toward it and helping them build a path to the dream. And I think that's more important than anything, because I notice that the parents that were pushing really hard to get their kids into an Ivy League school, there's a big percentage of those kids that either commit suicide. It's 1 in 300, so 1/3 of 1%. That's really unacceptable. They'll commit suicide, or they'll finish their degree that they don't want, that they were pressured into, and they live the rest of their life potentially on drugs or just depressed. Even I've met doctors that they went through everything to become a doctor, and they're kind of trapped in that career, and they don't really want to do that. And some of them are strong enough to change, and some of them are not. And so I just think it's really important to think of parenting as a long game. I remember when my son was younger, and I didn't think of it as a long game. I thought it was all about that test or getting into that school, or things that don't make any sense to me now I thought it made a big difference. I see people freaking out about getting their kid into the right preschool. Like, there's no possible way that can make a difference. That's all about the parent's dream and not about the kid's dream. So it's super important that we realize there really are two ways of looking at it. Are we going to put our dream on our kid and have them accomplish our dream for us? Or are we going to recognize them as a totally separate person with separate skills and talents that we want to pull out of them so that they can live the dream that they are meant to live?
Because that's the society we got brought up in, and it's, oh, what will other people's opinions be? And actually, it's a reflection on me if they don't get the result. But the reality is, if that person ends up in rehab or has to take prescription drugs to stop anxiety or stress, they're not healthy. Whereas actually, if your son or daughter is doing the thing that they love and their physical, mental, and emotional health is stable, that's actually way more important. And who knows, there's been plenty of people that haven't got the results from university that actually are the most successful people in the world. There's very few that went to university that are the most successful. In fact, and we need doctors, and you get an amazing transformation to have helped your son get to that point.
So true. I can't even explain how I feel inside knowing that I've been able to help him with these tools. But what's even bigger than that now is I want every parent to have these tools, because they are so easy and so learnable. really it's about changing from telling our kids what to do to asking them what they want and helping them get what they want. And there's a whole science around it that's proven in so many ways, especially in the business community and in life coaching. And so knowing that these tools have been around for years and that they work, and then we can apply them to parenting. Everyone's been applying them to business, but they really work in parenting as just as well. So yeah, I feel really blessed to be able to have that and share that with other people. Any last messages that you want to leave for our audience today?
Always think, when you look back on your life, do you think you've given your child or children the best opportunity to be healthy and happy? And sometimes that means don't put your stuff on them or your expectations. Actually let them, like what you've discussed and how you've done that with your son now, let them learn, let them grow, let them be their individual, and know as a parent, hey, I'm here. I'm here for you if you fall. I'm here for you if you need an arm around you. I'm here for you if you're in flow, and I'll be hanging on to your coattails as you're having this success, because most importantly, that you, like I said before, you're happy emotionally, physically, and mentally.
Well, that was a great interview. Thank you so much for taking the time today. And hopefully, parents are seeing that it's super important for them to allow their kids to grow by asking them questions. And if you would like to learn any more out there, you can come join us and see what we have going on at my website, which is Every Parent is a Life Coach, and continue to learn with more of our videos and more of our interviews. And thank you so much again. Thank you, Lee. Bye-bye.